What happens when you leave your husband because of his financial struggles, only to see him rise to unimaginable wealth years later? How does a divorce turn into a bitter reminder of your own self-made decisions? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Kendra, and if I'm being honest, I didn't expect things to turn out the way they did. When I left Austin, I thought it was the right decision. I had my reasons, many of them in fact. He wasn't making enough money, and that was wearing me down. I wanted more than the life we had. I wanted comfort, freedom, and success. When I married him, I thought we'd be able to build something together, but the reality was different. Over time, the weight of our financial struggles started to wear me out. He was always working hard, but nothing seemed to change. It was the same cycle over and over. Endless bills, constant stress, and no clear way out. Austin was a good man, a kind man, but he couldn't give me the one thing I needed most: stability. He wasn't poor in spirit, he never gave up, but he was poor in the things that mattered: money, status, security. I had dreams, big dreams, and with Austin, I started to feel like those dreams would never come true. So, I told myself that leaving was for the best. I told myself I deserved more. It wasn't an easy decision, but it wasn't as difficult as it should have been. By the time I made up my mind, I was already emotionally distant. I had been pulling away for months, maybe even longer. The physical distance between us had started long before I packed my bags. I stopped wanting to touch him, stopped needing him in the way I once did. We still had sex, of course. Why wouldn't we? But it was different, more mechanical, more out of obligation than desire. I told myself it wasn't his fault, I just needed space. But deep down, I knew what I was doing. I knew I was seeking something elsewhere. I didn't even have to try too hard. There were always people willing to give me attention. I hadn't planned to cheat, but I didn't exactly stop it from happening either. It started with little comments, innocent enough at first, a few glances, a couple of compliments here and there. But then it escalated. Tessa, a friend of mine, started pushing me to explore what I wanted. She kept telling me I deserved to feel alive again, to have fun, to not be tied down by the weight of my own decisions. I was young, I was beautiful, and I had a right to enjoy my life. I didn't even think about Austin much when I first started seeing someone else. It was just a fling, a temporary thing to make me feel better about myself. Someone who could make me forget about the frustrations of my life at home. Tessa, of course, encouraged it. She told me I needed to stop being so serious about everything, to just have fun and embrace my freedom. And for a while, I did. I would go out, meet new people, laugh, flirt, and feel powerful. I never thought about how Austin might feel. I told myself he'd be fine. After all, he wasn't the one who was trapped. He wasn't the one who needed to escape. I'd like to say that I didn't regret it, but that wouldn't be true. I felt guilty sometimes, not because I was cheating, but because I knew I was being selfish. I knew I was doing something that could ruin everything, but I couldn't stop myself. I justified it in every possible way. He hadn't done enough for me, so why should I stay faithful to him? Why should I give him the best of myself when he hadn't done the same? Austin had always been there for me when things were bad, but in my mind, he had failed me in the one way that mattered most. And now it was my turn to focus on me. I remember one night, sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in front of me as I looked out the window. Austin was on the couch, watching TV. It should have been a normal night, but it wasn't. I could feel the tension in the air, a heaviness I couldn't shake. Austin had been working on a side project, something he hoped would turn into a bigger business opportunity. I couldn't bring myself to care about it. I told him it was great, of course, but I didn't feel anything. I just felt tired. I had no interest in hearing about his latest ideas or the potential plans he had. I just wanted to escape. And escape I did. The affair wasn't planned, but I didn't try to stop it either. At first, I told myself it was just a harmless distraction, nothing more. But after a while, I stopped seeing it that way. It became something else, something that made me feel powerful. It was a feeling I hadn't had in so long. I hadn't felt this alive since before we got married, and certainly not since we started struggling financially. I started to believe that I deserved this. I deserved to feel wanted. I deserved someone who could make me feel like I was the center of their world, even if just for a moment. I wasn't asking for much, but it seemed like Austin could never give me that. He was too caught up in his own world, his own struggles, and I couldn't keep living in that world. I remember the moment I decided to leave him. It was a Friday night, and we were sitting in the living room, just like any other night. But that night, I couldn't take it anymore. Austin had just said something about his latest project, something I barely registered, and I realized that he wasn't the man I had fallen in love with. I couldn't even remember the last time I had looked at him with desire. I thought about the man I had met years ago, full of ambition, drive, and passion. He was gone now, replaced by someone who just seemed tired. Tired of trying, tired of living, tired of everything. So, I packed my things. It wasn't as dramatic as it sounds. There was no shouting, no tears, no emotional breakdown. I just started taking my things, moving them into the guest room. I didn't even say goodbye. I couldn't. Not after everything that had happened. He knew. He had to know. I didn't want to be with someone who wasn't going to fight for me. I wanted more. I wanted excitement. And I convinced myself that I was justified in leaving. After all, I wasn't happy. I had given him years of my life, and I had gotten nothing in return. What was I supposed to do? Stay in a marriage that was draining the life out of me? But even as I walked out, I knew deep down that I had made a mistake. I wasn't walking away from Austin. I was walking away from the best thing that ever happened to me, and I didn't even realize it until it was too late. The night I left, Austin didn't say anything. He didn't try to stop me. He just stared at me with that look, the same look I had seen so many times in the past. But I didn't care. I thought I was free. But now, as I sit here, I wonder, was I ever truly free? Or was I just running from the very thing that could have made me whole again? I don't think I realized just how far gone I was until I saw Austin's reaction, or rather, the lack of one. The moment I made the decision, packed my things, and stepped out of the life we had built together, he just stood there, silent. He didn't fight for me. He didn't beg. It was as if he had already checked out long before I ever did. That thought ate at me. What had I done to make him so indifferent? I told myself it didn't matter. I was free. I had a whole new world to explore. It felt like I was walking into a brand new chapter of my life. The affair, which had started as a way to feel desired and special again, started to become more of a fixture in my life. It wasn't just an escape anymore. It became a need, a craving. I had tasted what it was like to be wanted, truly wanted, in a way that Austin never made me feel. And I couldn't shake it. Tessa, my friend who had encouraged me to pursue this fling in the first place, kept urging me to lean into it. "You deserve to have fun," she'd say. "You've been carrying him for so long. Don't let him hold you back." And I believed her. I had spent too many years being weighed down by responsibilities that weren't mine to carry, by someone who, despite his best efforts, couldn't give me the life I wanted. So, I dove deeper into the affair. Every stolen moment, every secret text message, it was all a way for me to reclaim a little bit of myself. The woman I used to be before, everything started to feel like a chore. But it wasn't all excitement. There were moments where guilt would creep in, especially when I saw how Austin was handling the situation. I'd run into him at the store, or pass him on the street, and he looked lost. He wasn't the same man I had left behind. That hit me harder than I expected. He wasn't angry. He wasn't vengeful. He was just empty. The Austin I knew, the one who used to make me laugh and who would go out of his way to take care of me, was nowhere to be found. It was like the life had drained out of him. I told myself it wasn't my fault. I didn't ask for this to happen. I didn't want to leave him, not exactly. But I had to, and I convinced myself I had made the right decision. But as time went on, I couldn't help but feel like I was missing something. Austin's silence, his lack of resistance, started to eat at me. I began to wonder if I had left too soon. Was he really the problem? Or had I just gotten too comfortable with the idea of being miserable that I couldn't see the good when it was right in front of me? I began looking back at our life together, at the moments when things were good, when Austin was trying, when he was ambitious. I remembered the days when he'd stay up late, working on his side projects, trying to build something more for us. But those memories felt distant, faded, and I knew I couldn't go back. Not now, not after what I had done. The affair became my crutch. It was the one thing that kept me from truly confronting the mess I had made. I tried to distance myself from the guilt, pretending that I was fine. I told myself that I was allowed to enjoy life, that I had given so much of myself to Austin and our relationship, that it was my time now. I didn't want to feel bad about it, and when the guilt did start to creep in, I would push it aside. I would look at the texts, at the messages from my affair partner, and remind myself of the validation they gave me. They made me feel seen. They made me feel important. But that didn't stop the nagging thought that something wasn't right. I started to notice how much I relied on Tessa's validation, how she would always tell me that I was doing the right thing, that I deserved to be happy. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about proving to myself that I wasn't wrong, that I wasn't a villain in my own story. But deep down, I knew I was. I could feel the weight of it in every conversation I had with anyone else, every time I smiled and pretended that everything was fine. Then there was the day I saw Austin again. It had been a few months since I left, and I was picking up some groceries when I ran into him. He looked different, better, somehow, more put together. He was wearing a nice jacket, a confident look on his face. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. This wasn't the man I left. This wasn't the man who had struggled. This was someone else, someone who had his life together. I wanted to say something to him. Apologize. Ask how he was doing. But the words caught in my throat. I didn't want to show weakness. I didn't want to admit that maybe, just maybe, I had made a mistake. I didn't want to show him that I was hurting too. So I smiled, gave him a quick nod, and walked away. That moment haunted me for days. I thought about it constantly. The way he had looked, the way he had seemed so in control. It made me feel small. It made me feel like I had been the one holding him back all along. It wasn't supposed to be this way. I had left him, thinking I would find something better, but now it seemed like he had found his own way without me. I tried to push the thought out of my head. I told myself that I had made the right choice, that Austin wasn't the man I needed. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had lost something important. I didn't just leave a man. I left someone who had loved me, someone who had been there for me, even when I didn't deserve it. And now, he was doing better without me. The worst part was that I had no one to blame but myself. I had walked away from him, choosing myself over the man who had always been there. And now, I couldn't even bring myself to apologize. Because in my heart, I knew I had destroyed something beautiful. So, I buried those thoughts. I threw myself into the affair, into the attention I was getting, into the fantasy that I could outrun the consequences. But with every day that passed, it became harder to ignore the truth that Austin was better off without me, and the truth that, deep down, I was starting to wonder if I was better off with him. But I couldn't turn back now. I had made my bed. I had chosen my path. The only question now was whether I would ever be able to live with the decision I had made. It wasn't long after that encounter with Austin at the grocery store that the truth started creeping into my mind. The thing I had been running from for so long, the one thing I had buried deep down inside myself, was now impossible to ignore. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't lie to myself or to anyone else. Austin wasn't just doing fine without me, he was thriving. And here I was, stuck in a situation I had created. The life I thought I wanted, the life I convinced myself would make me happy, was crumbling around me. I tried to tell myself that I was still in control, that everything would work out as long as I kept moving forward. But the more I tried to push the truth away, the more it pushed back. It wasn't just Austin's success that gnawed at me. It was the realization that I had pushed him away for the wrong reasons. I had told myself that I deserved more, that I couldn't settle for a life that wasn't as glamorous or as exciting as I wanted. But in doing so, I had thrown away something real. And now, I was left with nothing but the pieces of a life that I had built on self-deception. The affair had been a temporary distraction, but it was becoming more than that. Tessa's encouragement to live for myself had only made things worse. It was as if I had convinced myself that seeking attention from someone else would somehow fill the void inside me. But it didn't. It never did. I thought I could escape the emptiness by chasing after new experiences, new relationships, new thrills. But the truth was, I had never felt more hollow. And every time I went deeper into the affair, I felt further from the woman I used to be. The woman who had once believed in love, in loyalty, in building something together with someone. I could feel it starting to eat away at me, piece by piece. The guilt, the shame. But worse than that, I began to see how Austin was handling everything. He wasn't like me, running from one distraction to the next. He was focused. He was determined. And he was making it happen. His business, which had once seemed like just another one of his far-fetched dreams, was now growing. I could see the signs of his success everywhere. New clients, a better job, more money. And it made me angry, because deep down, I realized that I had been the one holding him back all along. I had been the one who had told him his dreams weren't worth pursuing, who had refused to support him when he needed it most. The worst part was that Austin had done everything right. He hadn't tried to destroy me. He hadn't tried to tear me down. He had just moved on. He hadn't begged me to come back. He hadn't tried to make me feel guilty for what I had done. Instead, he had chosen to rebuild his life, to rise above the wreckage of our marriage. And that, in a way, made me feel like the worst kind of person, because I realized now that I had been the one who failed him. I had been the one who had betrayed him, who had thrown away our marriage without ever truly understanding what I was giving up. I started to see things more clearly. The more Austin grew, the more I shrank. The more I tried to convince myself that I was better off without him, the more I realized I was wrong. But it was too late. I had made my decision, and now I had to live with the consequences. Tessa, of course, was still in my ear, telling me to embrace my independence, to enjoy the freedom that came with being single. "You're doing great," she'd say, encouraging me to go out more, to meet new people, to keep living my life. But her words started to ring hollow. I was living a lie, and I knew it. I wasn't enjoying anything. I wasn't free. I was trapped in a cycle of self-doubt and regret, and the more I tried to ignore it, the more it consumed me. There were moments when I thought about reaching out to Austin. I thought about apologizing, telling him that I was sorry for everything I had done. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. Part of me still didn't want to admit that I had made a mistake. Part of me still wanted to believe that I had made the right choice, that I had somehow been justified in leaving him for the life I thought I deserved. But I knew, deep down, that I was lying to myself. And then, one night, I saw it. Austin had posted something on social media. Nothing dramatic, just a simple photo of himself at his office, surrounded by paperwork, looking content and focused. But it wasn't just the photo that hit me. It was the caption. "Building something for the future," he had written. That simple sentence made everything come crashing down on me. It was a statement of intent, of purpose, and it was a reminder of everything I had thrown away. Austin wasn't just moving on. He wasn't just surviving. He was building, and he was doing it without me. I wasn't a part of his future anymore, and that realization hit me harder than anything else had. I sat there for hours, staring at that photo, wondering where things had gone wrong, wondering why I had ever let something so good slip through my fingers. I thought about the man Austin had been, the man I had loved and who had loved me, and I couldn't understand how I had let him go. How had I convinced myself that I was entitled to more? How had I believed that I could find happiness in someone else, in something else, when everything I needed had been right in front of me all along? But I didn't reach out to him. I didn't pick up the phone or send the message I had been considering. Instead, I closed my laptop and went to bed, the emptiness inside me growing with each passing moment. I had made my bed, and now I had to lie in it. The truth was, Austin had become everything I wanted to be: successful, focused, and free of the baggage I had carried for so long. And I, on the other hand, had become someone I didn't recognize. Someone who had given up on love, on loyalty, and on the man who had always been there for me. I wasn't ready to face that reality. Not yet. But I knew it was coming. And when it did, I wasn't sure if I would be able to live with myself. It's strange how quickly life can change, even when you feel like you've got everything under control. I had convinced myself that I had moved on, that I was doing fine without Austin, but I was only fooling myself. The truth was, I had been living in denial for months. My carefully constructed world, built on the belief that I was justified in leaving him, was starting to crumble. Every time I checked my phone, every time I saw something that reminded me of him, it felt like the walls were closing in. The most significant blow came when I received that legal letter. It was simple at first, just a few papers folded neatly in an envelope. But when I saw who it was from, Austin's lawyer, I knew things had taken a drastic turn. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I opened it, the words on the page blurry at first. Austin was taking legal action. He had filed for divorce. Not only that, but he was seeking to reclaim what he had lost: his dignity, his reputation, and what I had taken from him. The letter outlined the financial responsibilities I had shirked, the way I had broken our marriage without any regard for him or his future. I sat there, staring at the papers in disbelief. How could he do this? How could he fight back like this? Part of me had expected him to simply let it all go, to move on with his life quietly, never confronting me or forcing me to face what I had done. But that was the thing about Austin. He wasn't the passive man I had painted him to be. He was smart, and he had finally found his strength. I was the one who had been weak, hiding behind my own excuses, convincing myself that leaving him was the only option. I didn't know what to do with myself. I thought I could laugh it off. I told myself that I could play the victim if I needed to. I could tell people that Austin was overreacting, that I had done nothing wrong. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the truth. I had been the one who walked away. I had been the one who had thrown everything away without ever fully considering what it would cost me. And now, the price was being paid in the form of these legal papers. The weeks that followed were a blur. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was spiraling out of control. The affair that had once seemed like an exciting escape had now turned into a burden I could barely carry. I couldn't focus on anything. I couldn't go a single day without thinking about Austin and what I had done. But it was too late. I had already made my bed, and now I had to lie in it. I tried to talk to Tessa about it, but even she seemed to distance herself. She wasn't as supportive as she had once been. She told me to just let it go and move on. But how could I? How could I move on when everything I had worked for was collapsing in front of me? Austin wasn't just fighting for his rights. He was fighting for something deeper: his sense of self, his dignity. And as much as I hated to admit it, I was losing. I couldn't help but wonder if this was all some sort of cosmic retribution. I had left him when he was at his lowest, when he was struggling. I had written him off, convinced myself that I deserved better. And now here he was, rising above it all. He had built something real, something lasting, and I had nothing to show for the decisions I had made. I thought about all the times I had belittled him for not being enough. I had mocked his efforts, made him feel like he wasn't capable of achieving what I wanted. How ironic, I thought, that now he was the one who had everything. How cruel it seemed that I had pushed him to the point where he had nothing left to lose, only for him to prove me wrong. But what could I do? I couldn't go back in time and undo everything I had done. I couldn't fix the mess I had created. The affair, the abandonment, the lies, none of it could be erased. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had spent so long thinking I was the victim in this situation, but I was the one who had destroyed everything. I tried to hold on to the idea that I could still fix things. Maybe if I reached out to Austin, maybe if I showed him how sorry I was, he would forgive me. But every time I considered calling him, I found myself hesitating. What if he didn't want to hear it? What if he had already moved on? What if I had waited too long? The thought terrified me. The idea that I had waited too long, that the chance for reconciliation had slipped through my fingers, was almost unbearable. But what was I supposed to do now? I couldn't undo the past. I couldn't change the choices I had made. I could only face the consequences and hope that I could find some way to pick up the pieces of my life. In the weeks that followed, the legal proceedings became more intense. Austin's lawyer sent more documents, financial records, custody plans, everything carefully prepared and well thought out. It wasn't just about money, it was about the future. And in every document, every email, I could see Austin's resolve. He wasn't going to let me walk away without facing the consequences. He was going to make sure I understood the weight of what I had done. But the hardest part, the part that truly broke me, was when I saw Austin's name in the papers. I didn't know how he had done it, but somehow he had made a name for himself. His business, which had started as just an idea, was now a thriving company. He was well respected in his field, and people were starting to recognize his name. It hit me like a slap in the face. I had left this man, the man who had once been a source of my frustration, and now he was the one everyone wanted to be around. I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of regret, the kind of regret that eats away at you, that fills you with a sense of helplessness. Austin was no longer the man I had left behind. He was better. He was stronger. He was someone else entirely. And I was left with nothing but the remnants of a life I had destroyed. The legal battle wasn't just about money or custody. It was about pride. It was about redemption. And as much as I hated to admit it, Austin had already won. He had regained control over his life, over his future, and I was the one left wondering if I would ever be able to find mine again. I thought I could escape the consequences, but I couldn't. They were here, staring me in the face, and all I could do was watch as Austin moved on without me. He had built a life, a future, and I had destroyed mine. And as the days passed, I realized that no matter how much I tried to fight it, there was no escaping what I had done. The past was behind me, and now I had to face the future. The future without Austin. The future I had created for myself. The legal papers were just the beginning. As I sat there, staring at the stack of documents Austin's lawyer had sent me, it became painfully clear that my life was about to be turned upside down. I had thought I could just walk away from my marriage without facing any real consequences, but I was wrong. Austin was not going to let me go without holding me accountable for everything I had done. And now, he had all the power. He was in control. I tried to tell myself that it wasn't that bad, that the lawyer's letters were just part of the process, but deep down I knew the truth. Austin was coming for me. He wasn't going to settle for an easy divorce. This wasn't going to be a clean break. He wanted something more from me, something I wasn't ready to give. He wanted me to face the choices I had made, the lies I had told, and the way I had treated him. I had spent so long pretending that I didn't care, that I was better off without him, but now I could see how foolish that was. Austin wasn't just fighting for money or property. He was fighting for his dignity, for the respect he had lost because of me. And as much as I wanted to deny it, I knew I had taken that from him. It was hard to admit, but I had underestimated him. I had thought he would just let me go, that he would quietly accept my departure and move on. But Austin wasn't like that. He wasn't the man I had left behind. He had grown, both in strength and in confidence. And now, he was making sure that I understood just how much I had underestimated him. The weeks passed, and the legal battle only intensified. I found myself growing more and more isolated. Tessa, the one person who had always been in my corner, started to pull away. She didn't want to get involved in the mess I had created. I couldn't blame her. She had always encouraged me to embrace my freedom, to live my life on my own terms, but now it felt like she was distancing herself. And as much as I hated to admit it, I couldn't deny that I was losing the people around me. Austin was no longer the only one who was moving on. I was being left behind, and it was starting to sink in. I spent my days navigating the legal system, meeting with my own lawyer, trying to prepare for what was coming next. But every time I sat down with those papers, every time I reviewed the evidence Austin's team had gathered, I felt a deep sense of shame. I had cheated. I had abandoned my husband when he needed me most. And now, Austin was making me face it all. I tried to keep up appearances. I posted on social media, pretending that everything was fine. I went out with friends, laughed, and tried to convince myself that I was still the woman I once was. But the truth was, I wasn't. I was broken, I was lost, and I had no one to blame but myself. The hardest part was seeing how far Austin had come. His business was thriving. People respected him. He was becoming the man I'd always wanted him to be, just not with me. And it was like a punch to the gut every time I saw his name in the news or heard someone mention his success. It was as if he was showing me, in the most public way possible, that I had been wrong. I had been the one holding him back, and now he was thriving without me. I couldn't escape the guilt. It followed me everywhere. I would lie awake at night, thinking about all the things I had done to him, all the ways I had pushed him away, only to see him rise above it all. I couldn't help but wonder if this was karma, if this was the universe's way of making me pay for what I had done. And maybe it was. Maybe I had earned this, but there was still a part of me that couldn't accept it. I kept telling myself that I had done what was best for me, that I had been justified in leaving Austin. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that wasn't true. I had been selfish. I had been blinded by my own desires, by my own fear of being stuck in a life I wasn't happy with. And now I was paying the price. The legal battle wasn't just about money. It was about power. It was about control. Austin was taking back everything I had tried to take from him, his dignity, his life, his future. And I had no choice but to watch as he built something new, something that didn't include me. I remember the moment I realized that there was no going back. I had been sitting in my lawyer's office, going over the details of the settlement, when I saw Austin's name on a document. It was a letter from his lawyer, outlining the terms of our divorce. I read through it, my hands shaking as I saw the conditions he was asking for: custody of the children, the division of assets, the alimony. And at that moment, it hit me. This wasn't just a divorce. This was Austin taking everything back. He was reclaiming his life, his future, and his dignity, and I had nothing left to fight with. I wanted to scream, to throw the papers down and demand that things be different, but I knew I couldn't. I had no leg to stand on. I had destroyed everything, and now I had to live with the consequences. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to fix this. I had made so many mistakes, hurt so many people, and now I was left with nothing. The life I had wanted, the freedom, the excitement, the validation, was all a lie. And the person who had tried to hold it all together, the one person I had betrayed, was now walking away with everything. It felt like a slow death. The realization that I had lost it all. Austin had moved on. He was becoming the man I had always wanted him to be, but without me. And I was left in the wreckage of my own decisions, wondering if I would ever be able to rebuild what I had lost. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had thrown away everything that mattered, and there was no going back. The legal papers were only the beginning. The real punishment, the real consequence, was living with myself. I don't think I realized just how deep the hole I dug for myself was until the final court hearing. By then, everything had shifted. The legal battle, which I had once thought would be just a nuisance, had become the defining event of my life. I had thought I was playing a game, that I could manipulate things to my advantage, but I was wrong. It wasn't a game. This was real life. And now, I was at the mercy of the decisions I had made. I sat there in the courtroom, my hands folded tightly in my lap, trying to maintain some semblance of composure. But inside, I was a wreck. The walls of the room seemed to close in on me with every passing minute. I had convinced myself that I could win this, that I could come out of this divorce with my dignity intact. But as I looked around at the sea of lawyers, the cold, indifferent judge, and the people I had once loved, I realized something. I had already lost. Austin was sitting on the other side of the room, calm, collected, his expression unreadable. He had already won. He didn't need to say anything more. His lawyer had done all the talking, and I could see it in his eyes. He had already moved on. The man I had left behind, the one I had thought was weak and incapable of succeeding without me, had found his strength, and now he was standing tall, having rebuilt his life in a way I never thought possible. For the first time since all of this started, I felt a deep sense of regret. It wasn't the kind of regret where you wish you had made a different decision. No, this was different. This was the kind of regret that gnawed at you from the inside, the kind that made you realize just how much you had messed up. And worse, it made you realize that you had no one to blame but yourself. I had walked away from Austin, thinking I could find something better, something more exciting. I had convinced myself that I deserved more than the life we had built together. I had let my own desires and insecurities blind me to the fact that I was throwing away something real, something that could have lasted. I had traded it for fleeting moments of excitement and validation, never once stopping to think about the long-term consequences of my actions. And now, sitting in that courtroom, I understood what I had lost. I had lost Austin, yes, but I had also lost myself. The woman who had once believed in love, in loyalty, in building a future with someone, she was gone. In her place was someone who couldn't face the consequences of her decisions, someone who couldn't even admit to the mistake she had made. The judge's voice cut through my thoughts, and I snapped back to reality. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. My lawyer was speaking, but I wasn't really listening. I knew what was coming. Austin had made sure of it. The papers, the evidence, everything had been meticulously laid out in his favor. He had all the right to ask for what he was asking for. Alimony, custody of the kids, the house, the business, all of it. I couldn't fight it anymore. I had no defense. What could I say? That I had been selfish? That I had made a mistake? I had already tried to justify my actions over and over again in my own mind, but the truth was unavoidable now. I had messed up, and now I was paying the price. I tried to keep my emotions in check, but it was impossible. My chest tightened as I heard the judge's final ruling. It felt like the floor had fallen out beneath me. Everything I had built up, the idea of myself, the life I had planned, had crumbled in an instant. Austin was taking everything, and I was left with nothing. The papers arrived a week later, the final legal documents. The settlement was in Austin's favor. As expected, I was being forced to leave the house. The kids, who I had once thought would be mine to keep, were now going to be raised in the home that Austin had built. And the worst part, he didn't need me anymore. He had already moved on with his life. He was no longer the man I had left behind. He was someone else entirely, someone stronger, more confident, and better off without me. I had thought I could outsmart him, that I could manipulate the situation to my advantage, but I had underestimated him. And now, here I was, the woman who had once walked away from everything, left with nothing. There were moments in the days that followed when I tried to reach out to Austin. I sent him a few texts, apologizing for what I had done, trying to explain myself, but he didn't respond, not at first. Then, when he did, his words were short, polite, and distant. It was as if he had already let go of me, already let go of the past, and I couldn't blame him. What did I expect? That he would just come back to me? That he would forgive me? I spent the next few days in a haze, unsure of what to do with myself. The life I had once thought was mine was gone. My friends had started to drift away. Tessa, who had once been my closest confidant, had stopped responding to my calls and texts. It was like the world had closed in on me, and I was left standing in the ruins of everything I had destroyed. I kept telling myself that I would figure it out, that I would rebuild, but deep down, I knew that was a lie. I had destroyed everything that had been important to me. I had sacrificed love, loyalty, and trust for something that turned out to be empty. And now, the consequences were staring me in the face. I think the hardest part was realizing that I had never truly understood what I had until it was gone. I had spent so many years focused on my own desires, so obsessed with what I thought I needed, that I had completely ignored the person who had always been there for me. Austin had loved me. He had been there for me in ways I couldn't even appreciate at the time. And now, he was moving on with his life, and I was the one left behind. But that was the reality of the situation. I had made my choices, and now I had to live with them. There was no one to blame but myself. Austin had done everything right. He had worked hard, built something for himself, and moved on. And I had made excuses, I had lied, and I had pushed him away. I had chosen excitement over stability, novelty over love, and now I was paying the price for it. In the month that followed, I tried to rebuild my life. I found a new place to live, started a new job, and tried to move on. But it wasn't the same. I wasn't the same. The woman I had been before, the one who was strong and confident, was gone. In her place was someone who had lost everything, someone who couldn't even face the consequences of her own actions. I would look back at Austin's success, at the life he was building, and I would feel a deep sense of loss. He was happy. He had everything he needed. And I was still trying to figure out who I was, what I had become, and how I could possibly fix what I had broken. In the end, the one thing I couldn't escape was the truth. Austin had been right all along. He was the one who had built something real. He was the one who had found his strength. And I was the one left in the wreckage, struggling to put the pieces of my life back together. There was no epilogue to this story. There was no happy ending waiting for me. The consequences were the ending, and I would have to live with them for the rest of my life.